So you're thinking about living in Birmingham, Alabama, a highway hub in the center of Alabama right outside of Atlanta. On today's video, I'm going to give you some information that's going to help you in your decision-making process to see if Birmingham, Alabama really is a place you and your family want to end up. This area offers mountain views, mild weather, great options for affordability and housing, and has a strong job market within the metropolitan area. However, the most obvious thing about this city is that it's one of the most dangerous cities in the United States. And on today's video, I'm going to give you some information before we get into our video, just so you understand how dangerous Birmingham, Alabama is. And you might be thinking, hold on, I'm not going to live in the worst neighborhoods in Birmingham. I'm going to live in a nice suburban area like Hoover. The violence in Birmingham isn't just limited to the city limits. The entire state of Alabama is a dangerous place. Alabama has the third highest homicide rate of any state in the country. That means that anywhere in Alabama, you're more likely to get killed than the following cities: Portland, Oregon; Charlotte, North Carolina; Fresno, California; Miami, Florida; Oklahoma City; Sacramento, California; Los Angeles, California; Long Beach, California; Seattle, Washington; San Francisco; Austin, Texas; Omaha, Boston, New York; even Virginia Beach are safer than anywhere in Alabama.
Violence is not contained to Birmingham city limits. We're told the victims are a teenage girl and 2 adult men.
Kidnapping first and capital murder, sodomy first. They were made public by the suspect's decision to videotape portions of this horrific act.
Is actually the husband of the victim and also the father of 2 of those children.
Even the rural counties surrounding Birmingham have ridiculously high homicide rates. This year alone, we're halfway through the year, and 93 people have been killed within the city limits of Birmingham, making it literally the most dangerous city in the United States. And the violence does spread outward into the rural counties nearby. Many people are under the impression that the violence and headline news is only centered around the city core of Birmingham. However, it's a dangerous region in its entirety. You can take a wrong turn a few blocks away from the airport and be looking down the barrel of 4 rifles. Literally, I'm not exaggerating, it happened to me and my family. So you might just be picking up some family members at the airport, make a wrong turn, next thing you know you are in a dangerous neighborhood. The types of neighborhoods where if a car enters that they're not familiar with, they're gonna go check you out armed to the teeth. And this is the reality of violence in Birmingham, Alabama. You don't become the most dangerous city in the country by chance. This is something that is encrypted into the DNA of the city. Jefferson County, which includes areas like Hoover and Homewood, is the 6th most dangerous county in the United States with a homicide rate of 29 per 100,000. Terrifying. Now the county just to the south of Jefferson, Shelby County, has an income higher than any other county in Florida, for example, which is pretty good of an achievement. There is money in this metropolitan area, but is it worth dying for that money? And then next is there's one other little catch. You have to be white. See, despite the fact that Birmingham is the largest black majority city in the country by percentage, they don't get to take home any of that money because whites in Birmingham make 4 times more money than blacks. See, I'll tell you a little secret about Birmingham, Alabama. Literally through the center of the city is a mountain range, and this mountain range serves as a segregation line with the blacks living on top of that line and the whites below it. Birmingham is geographically segregated. But don't take my word for it. Let's look at some race maps. Now, the black population is represented by green, the white population is represented by blue, Hispanic by yellow, and Asian by red. You can clearly see the red line that I drew in the middle, which is the mountain range. Anything south of that mountain range is predominantly white, and anything north of that mountain range is predominantly black until you get to the rural outskirts of Birmingham. Notice how there are very few shades in the middle, and that is because neighborhoods are usually predominantly white or predominantly black. There is no mixing in this city. To give you a comparison, this is what the city of Houston, Texas looks like. You can see it's just a complete mix. Here's the colorful Bay Area in California. You can see all types of different communities. As compared to Tampa, Florida, you can see there's a lot of shades in the middle. That's neighborhoods that are just kind of mixed. As compared to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, you can see there's a mix here as well. Some segregation, but not as bad. Even the city of Jacksonville, Florida, which is also in the deep south, has black population spread through the entire map and little islands. But Birmingham is a black or white city. You're either in a purely white area or a purely black area. There's very little integration in the city. It is still the most segregated city in the United States. And don't think you're going to move to Alabama and be some type of hero. This is the most violent city in the United States, and they enforce their segregation law. So if you think you're going to move there and be some type of hero, there's a tax for doing that. You're going to be charged for it. So don't think you're just going to move to Alabama and, well, I'm not racist, they're racist, it's not going to bother to affect you. You have to live in this environment on a daily basis. When you walk into a store, when you get a burger in a drive-thru sandwich somewhere, doesn't matter what you're doing, you have to contend with the fact that this area is segregated and the people here don't mix. This might mean that you walk into a restaurant, look at your surroundings, and have to walk right back out. If you violate their segregation rules, chances are you're going to be punished for it. In the case of a restaurant, they may take an exceedingly long time to make your food. Then when you finally get your food, you're going to find out that it's missing stuff or it hasn't been made right or who knows what else. So don't think you're going to go into this scenario and not have to play by the rules. This is just the facts of living in Alabama. You might put something on the Facebook marketplace and you have to look at the profile of the person who's buying it to see if they can come to your neighborhood. And if you let them come and they're not supposed to, chances are problems are going to occur because of that. We're talking your house could get broken into and robbed. We're talking your neighbors could say that the reason their house got robbed was because you had somebody over. It really gets complicated and outright dangerous. You have to politic race in Alabama. It's not optional. If you don't do it, it's going to come with some really hard realizations eventually. If you're a white person, you go into a black neighborhood and somebody hurts you, law enforcement's not going to protect you. They're going to tell you, why were you over there if you're white? Vice versa. If you're a black person and you go into a white area and something happens to you, they're going to tell you, well, why are you here? You're black. It's straightforward like that. There's no games or gimmicks. This is Alabama. They politic race. That's the way this region of the country works. And these cities are absolutely dangerous combined with the racial tensions. So you're best sticking in line and not getting out of line with that situation because that's the reality of these cities. If you're Hispanic or Asian, then you got to deal with it on both sides. A little bit of cultural appropriation might save you a little bit, but it might just be wasting your time. Both if you're like a European trying to look white or Hispanic trying to look white, it really doesn't even work. The people here just play politics, and that's part of life in this city. The only positive thing that can be said about this is if you are white, you can economically fall into a better bracket, but you still have to contend with all the violence and fear that comes along with all this crap we're talking about. Being out at night within Birmingham city limits is absolutely terrifying. If it's a Saturday or Friday night, roll your windows down and hear which direction the gunfire is coming from. And that's not an exaggeration or a joke. That is literal. There's no southern hospitality here. Interactions with people are cold, blunt, and downright literally borderline disrespectful. It's get the crap out of the way. What do you want? And coming from another state, one of the most shocking things about Alabama is that it's somewhat of a police state. Law enforcement is an absolute supreme power in Alabama. You're not going to be videotaping cops or playing these little games we play with cops in other places. In Alabama, the cops are an absolute supreme force, and they don't need a warrant to search you. Literally, in Alabama, law enforcement does whatever they want. It's not like here in Florida where I get pulled over by a cop and I record him and we play games with him. And no, this is freaking Alabama. Cops here, this is like a freaking police state, literally. Their power is exceedingly strong. Nothing gets in their way, and if you have an altercation with a police officer, you're going to lose no matter what. I had a black cop in Alabama try to punch my teeth out because I forgot to say yes, sir. It is yes, sir, yes, ma'am. You better just watch what you say. Don't make eye contact with them. They are a supreme, powerful being. Alabama is a police state. So if you're coming from another state where you're used to talking back to the police or telling them that it's not your business what you're doing, or you're not going to comply with their unconstitutional checkpoint, you're going to really end up in a nasty situation, because you're going to find out in Alabama, if a cop wants to punch you upside the head, they absolutely will. And then they're going to arrest you for it. So don't think it's a game. You're literally going to have to be very careful if you're coming from another state, how you communicate. It's yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Don't say anything directly that can be considered offensive. You have to be indirect. I mean, vocabulary and just interacting with people in Alabama, that in itself is extraordinarily precarious. Something that if you're an outsider, you're going to have to be very careful with, because again, Alabama is a police state. They do whatever they want. Nobody gets in their way. If they tell you something, you have to do it. And if you don't do it, they're going to knock you upside the head. You might have an altercation or disrespect a police officer here, 3 or 4 miles down the road, something very bad could happen to you because they move like snakes. So don't ever think because you're not from Alabama that, again, you're going to be able to run and move the way you do in other states. Again, Alabama, law enforcement there is supreme. If they want to search your vehicle, they can. It's not like other states where they have to get a warrant. It's their word against yours, and you have absolutely no power. The same thing is if you have some type of legal altercation with the cops or with your neighbors or somebody else. Usually those people are going to know somebody. They're going to have contacts within local government. And whenever you're trying to defend your legal cases, you're going to find that it's already rigged against you. And the more you talk, the more you open your mouth, the deeper of a hole you're digging yourself into. And that's just simply the way Alabama works. It's really small town rule. And even in big cities like Birmingham, you have to contend with that. And again, after living in Florida, one of the scariest things for me in Alabama is the fact that the police there feels totalitarian. They just don't have any cap at all. They do what they want. You cooperate with them. You have very little rights, and the best thing you could do is stay clear out of their way. And if they pull you over, say as little as possible. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Don't disagree with anything they tell you. Just shut up, take the ticket, and get out of their way, because these people are really dangerous in Alabama. They have a lot of power. Also, the same thing can be said about dealing with regular people. You might have an altercation with somebody, and you may not realize that that person has contacts in law enforcement or in county or in municipality, and they'll literally make your life miserable. People here move really, really tactical. It's all about who you know, and if you're an outsider, you don't know anybody, everything that you do is going to become very difficult. So with the crime and the violence and the homicide and all the crazy things that happen in this city, you also have to be very street smart, very street savvy. You have to be careful and calculate everything you say, how you move. And if you're an outsider, you just may not be used to moving like that all the time. It can really, you might say something to somebody, and then you're not going to sleep at night if you think they took it the wrong way. So you have to be really, really careful what you say, how you move, how you behave, and what you're behaving, what it's putting on other people onto, because again, people here have absolutely no problem wiping you off the list. You're going to notice that in Birmingham, Alabama, there is an abnormally large percentage of the population that lives in government housing, like housing projects. People get food stamps, disability. Bleeding the American system is a pastime for people in Alabama, and a lot of people here literally live off the government. They pretend they have disability so they can get some money. They're disabled, they get food stamps, they live in government housing. It's like anything these people can do to screw over the American society and bleed our system, they're doing it. And it's actually like a lifestyle in Alabama. Both the whites and the blacks heavily participate in it. And you'll notice that the economy is kind of based around the first or the third of the month when people get their paychecks. So towards the end of the month, you'll notice that stores are empty, restaurants are empty, and then boom, comes the first and the third of the month, and the clubs are popping. The entire economy of Alabama literally revolves around these, what I call them is like a holiday. In fact, Dobie from Montgomery, Alabama has a favorite saying, the first of the month to me is like a holiday. So in Alabama, you're going to notice like the monthly rotation. Towards the end of the month, everything dries up, and then boom, everybody gets their checks and the economy starts to move again. It's kind of a weird monthly rotation, but once you move there, eventually you'll pick up on the fact that literally that's the way things work, because there's so many people leeching off the government. We're entering some dangerous housing projects. Pay close attention here. This guy's got some blinding lights, so now I have to stop my vehicle because I can't even see where I'm going. They're checking me out. There's people in that vehicle there. There's people on a vehicle behind them, and there's people on these cars here on the left. This may just look like normal interactions, but these people here is like a checkpoint before you enter this neighborhood. So the reason they sent that vehicle with those headlights out is because they already had a lookout further ahead that said, hey, we got a strange vehicle coming in here. So they send that vehicle with flashing headlights in case they decide that you're a threat. Well, you're blinded by these headlights and they can shoot you up and you can't see what the crap they're shooting at, or you can't even see where the shooting's coming from. So don't think it's a game out here in Birmingham, Alabama. These are extraordinarily dangerous neighborhoods. And a lot of times you'll notice vehicles parked with headlights, or two vehicles with headlights like that, or vehicles parked in strange positions. They'll put lights on you so that when you pass by, they can see inside your vehicle and they can blind you. And they'll use that like as a tactical advantage in case they have to shoot you up. So it is really dangerous just driving through these cities of Birmingham. It's a war zone. I mean, the numbers are there. It's dangerous. You have to be really alert. You also have to take note that the city of Birmingham has actually been losing population. People do not move to the city. If they move to the city, chances are they move out right away. They don't last here very long. People who move in, they all work together to move you out. So if you move into a neighborhood and it looks like there's a lot of pressure on you for moving in, don't think that's going to come off. It's only going to intensify. Your best bet is to just move out because they're not going to stop making your life miserable. So a YouTuber that recently moved to Montgomery, the next city south of Birmingham, and they were only there for like 6 months. They got the crap out of there, and that's the way it is in these areas. So you just have to be really careful because, again, dangerous cities. And I can't emphasize that enough. I don't want the whole entire video to be just about that, but you just have to understand, like, you're moving to a place that people literally move military. The other thing is you might live in a city where it's okay to honk the horn at another vehicle, or it's okay to, scream at somebody or flick somebody off in traffic. Your best bet is to not engage in any of that behavior. Just keep it yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Even when somebody's being disrespectful to you, you might see people be disrespectful to each other, but don't think you're going to be part of that, and it's not going to come with problems. So again, just make sure that, like, if here in Florida you can flick somebody off in traffic and scream at somebody, you're not going to do any of that in Alabama. People here are very courteous, and it's not because they're well-natured people. It is because the potential for things to get violent is always there. So if you're out in traffic and somebody cuts you off, or somebody, stayed sleeping at the red light, you may not even want to honk the horn at them. You just might want to let them do their thing and just kind of not engage people. Same thing with people driving the wrong direction. You be the one to move out of the way. You just have to always be courteous because the people here have absolutely no problem sending you back to the next decade. If you're not afraid of dying, the area is actually very scenic and beautiful. There's beautiful hills. The Cahava River has a lot of areas you can explore. And believe it or not, people don't seem to go on the outdoors too much in Alabama. So when you do go in the outdoors, it pretty much feels like you have the whole place to yourself. One of my favorite areas to spend time in the outdoors is the Cahava River. This is just southwest of Birmingham in Bibb County. There's the Cahava River Wildlife Management Area, I think it's called, or something like that. It's just country roads, and you can take this trail that parallels the river. Absolutely gorgeous. Some of the most beautiful scenery and rivers and clear waters that I've seen anywhere. Me and my wife really enjoyed going up there when we lived in Alabama. In fact, a lot of times I still miss it. I just don't think it's the hassle of going to Alabama. And once you get into the area of Centerville and some parts of Bibb County, for example, these rural communities, the people are really genuinely nice and friendly and helpful and kind, and it's a little bit of a refreshment, but you also have to know how to move and how to treat people with respect and all that. So if you go in there acting like a snob, they're not going to give you any mind at all. But anyways, if you do like nature and scenery, I would definitely recommend that you spend a lot of times in the outdoors. There are beautiful places. It's a beautiful mountain range, and it's a beautiful area, and nature and outdoors. If you like exploring rivers and creeks and areas like this, it's endless exploration and places that people will rarely ever get to see. Do note, never go into private property in Alabama. Make sure wherever areas you're going into are areas you are actually allowed to be in, because people in Alabama are very jealous of their private property. On the east side of Birmingham, heading towards Atlanta, near Moody, you have the Barber Car Museum. Quite literally one of the best attractions in the entire South. It's an incredible collection of vehicles and a great place to go with your family. There's a lot of jobs in the auto industry in the Birmingham area. You have Porsche has a few operations, Mercedes-Benz has a few operations, and this museum, if you're in that industry, would be a great thing to do. I definitely recommend it. Literally, it's one of the few museums across the United States that I have actually enjoyed it, and my wife Katie also enjoyed it, and it really is a marvelous collection of automobiles. So if you are finding yourself anywhere in the Birmingham area, do check out the Barber Car Museum. It will be definitely worth it. But if you are absolutely set on moving to Birmingham, remember that there is a line of segregation. If you are black, you can end up in areas a little bit further south, like the suburbs of Calera, Pelham, or a little bit more mixed. I would not recommend anybody end up on the north side of this line. It is just too dangerous. Even on the south side of this line, Hoover, Homewood, these areas that are predominantly white, there's a growing Hispanic population there, but I think they've had a lot of struggles. So it's a difficult area. I think most of the diversity now is pushing into Shelby County along the highway you'll see right there down the middle of the screen. I'm gonna guess most of the people watching today's video are gonna end up on the south side of that divide, that racial line. And if you end up in Hoover, it's a really nice area. When it comes to scenic views, mountains, trees, lakes, I mean, this area is just incredible. And there's a few places where you can get just some incredible views. The downside of living, though, in this particular area up in the mountains where it's just absolutely stunning is that it literally costs a lot of money to live here. And I mean a lot. And while you can literally move to a city in the same price range that's considerably safer, I would much rather aim for safety than scenic views in the same price range. But to each their own. If scenic views and mountain views is what you want, then this area definitely has it. Prices on homes here, I think, are a little excessive considering that you're in a dangerous city. So while Birmingham all over is fairly affordable, even pushing into Shelby County, if you actually want to be in the mountains with the great views and all that, it is not really affordable. It's, I guess, well, you might as well move to another city that's safer overall. That's what I never really got about the prices up here. It's like, okay, yeah, it's beautiful and scenic, but you're still in a very dangerous metropolitan area. So shouldn't the prices up here reflect that? Well, apparently they don't. Hoover, Homewood are analytically very safe cities. The problem here is that it's a segregated city, so I guess only white people can really enjoy to live here. My experience of Hispanics living here is that you are barely tolerated. I can't speak for blacks. If there's black people that live in Hoover, let me know. Don't tell me you know somebody who's black and lives there. Give me that crap. If you're going to go in the comment section and you're a black person living in Hoover, let me know how it's gone. I don't want to hear anybody else's opinions, because people in Alabama, they like to tell you, oh, it's not like that. Look, we're not retarded. Okay, we just looked at all the maps, all the race maps and all that. I've lived an hour south of this metropolitan area, and you're not gonna pull the wool over my head, and you're not gonna pull the wool over the people watching today's video. So if you make a comment that I know is along those lines, I'm just gonna delete it. People need to know the reality of these things, and trying to cover over these things has been like a hobby for the people of Alabama forever. They just don't want people to know how bad it really is. The only people that are really gonna give you this package the way it is people like me and other YouTubers who have moved to Alabama and left shortly after. And they're all gonna tell you the same exact thing. Like this YouTuber who recently made a video about moving to Montgomery, she even went as far as mentioning my videos. They left already. They were there for like 6 months. I was only there for a year, and that's because I had bought property and had to wait a year to sell it. Otherwise, I'd have gone way before that. 6 months is about as much as people from the outside world can tolerate living in Alabama. Mostly the violence and segregation is what really gets the people that are not used to that environment. But even if you move to a beautiful area like Hoover, There's one thing about Alabama, particular to this region, you just can't escape. This is one of the hottest regions in the country for tornadoes, and the rich neighborhoods are not exempt from that. Anywhere you live in Alabama, you're always going to have to contend with damages from tornadoes, and they're more common than you could even imagine if you've never lived in an area like this. Now, well-built houses stand up pretty good to tornadoes, but some of these smaller little suburban houses, they just get completely crushed by tornadoes. Mobile homes don't even stand a chance. Tornadoes is a very realistic threat. It isn't rare in Alabama, and it was more common than I would have hoped for while living there. Even more terrifying is when these tornadoes come at night. You hear the wind, you hear the crashing in the distance, you hear the sirens, but you can't see it because it's late at night. You wonder if it's coming at you. You can hear that roaring in the wind, and you know the tornado is near. Just saying, in the year that I lived in Alabama, I had a tornado come within like a mile of my house. So it is very common, and this is perhaps another reason why people don't invest too much in Alabama, because what's the point of making something too fancy with the fact that a tornado could come through and rip it all out in a heartbeat? It's part of life. And just like hurricanes, recovery is extensive. But I do feel like hurricanes hog up a longer period of your life. It seems like tornadoes, it's not like a hurricane where everybody loses power. If you've lived in an area where you get hurricanes, it's a very long process. Tornadoes are a very short process. I mean, it pretty much comes, it goes, and then, your street might lose power, but 2 houses down, they have power, because tornadoes are very centralized. And I think with that, it disrupts the lives of the people who are victimized by the tornado. But if you're a few blocks away, it's like it didn't even happen. So I guess that's one of the upsides of tornadoes, is that it's not like a hurricane where it immobilizes everything around you for weeks and months. It's very centralized. If it missed you, and your life keeps going. So when you're not scared of getting shot by the 7-Eleven, you're scared of a tornado in the middle of the night ripping your life to shreds. If I was going to move to the Birmingham area, I would seriously end up in the Shelby County side. If I had enough money, I guess I would live somewhere in the mountain range along that red line somewhere up there. But again, if you have that kind of money, why would you move to a city like Birmingham? I've never got that part of the equation, but there is a lot of economical incentives to living in Birmingham. There is a lot of work in the city. Even further into Shelby County and just further away from the core of urbanness of Birmingham, you have little towns like Helena that are very nice and safe, and there's new houses here, and you're kind of far enough from the problems of Birmingham to where day-to-day life probably won't be affected by crime as much. What's really sad about many of the things we've gone over on today's video is that this area is just beautiful. The plants, the landscape, the style of the architecture, the southern food is incredible in Birmingham. There isn't a lot of other options for food, but if you get used to the unhealthy southern food, there really is great food in this city. And there is a lot of growth. I said again that Shelby County to the south of Birmingham has higher incomes than any county in the state of Florida, but a third of the cost in housing. That means that economically it's one of those places where the math of living simply adds up. And there's few places where the math of living adds up more conveniently and more comfortable than in Alabama. And in particular, this region, the math of living just simply makes sense. The problem is just dealing with the people and the fact that they really don't like outsiders here, period. And it makes life very uncomfortable. Now, I would assume if you had enough money and moved into a neighborhood like this, a lot of the problems that I've talked about are just kind of geographical, regional. I'm sure in communities like this, you wouldn't have to deal with as much of those problems. But in my short time in Alabama, I dealt with problems with the property boundaries, endless problems, neighbors making noise on purpose. It seemed like a constant battle with the neighbors, and you're going to have to be very selective if you're going to buy a property. I don't think Alabama's the state you move to and immediately buy a property. I think Alabama's the type of state you rent a house from somebody, and if you like it, you see if the owner will sell you the house eventually. I don't think Alabama's the type of state where you should just blindly go in and buy a house, because the real estate laws for the state are very different than other states. And, once you buy a house that's problematic, that has issues that you're not aware of, the state's real estate laws are very complicated. Finding competent people to work is part of the reason there's a lot of work in this area, is because people are inept when it comes to working. And that's going to include your realtor. It could include the title company that's going to handle the transaction. There's a lot of specifics with buying property in Alabama that I would say this was a nightmare for me. It could easily be a nightmare for you. And that's including the fact that the realtor that I hired wasn't even from Alabama, and they pulled stuff on me that made it the most horrific real estate transaction that I've ever been involved in. You're going to notice too in the comment section people saying stuff to discredit what I'm saying. That's again part of their gimmick. Their gimmick is kind of passive aggressive or dismissive attitudes to minimize what you're saying and to make you wonder even if what you're saying is a coherent thing. But ignore all that. I'll delete as many comments as I can. But I just want you to know that, in the process of buying a home in Alabama, Alabama isn't like other states. Before you buy a home, read the real estate laws of Alabama very carefully and understand what exactly you're buying. And not just the buying process, the selling process. What's it going to be like when you go to sell that property, which could be a lot quicker than you imagine? When I bought my property in Alabama, I told myself, you're going to have to kill me to take me out of this house. And after enough people try to kill you, you'd be willing to give it up. You're just like, it ain't worth it. So I'm not going to say that in a beautiful gated community like this, that's going to be the case. But a lot of people, Alabama just doesn't work for them. Some people, they deal with the pressure directly, and other people can just sense the energy and they don't want to be on the receiving end of it, so they just realize that it doesn't work for them. Overall, affordability is a thing that everybody's looking for in the United States. But no matter how hard affordability comes, you should never place affordability above safety. I would recommend the area of Helena. It really puts you far enough outside of Jefferson County to where you're not really directly in that mess. And a lot of new communities have been built. People have moved there from other places. And I guess that's another aspect too of wherever you're buying property is. If you're buying property in this area, look for an area like this that's been newly built and everybody that lives in that community came from somewhere else. Because if you end up in an area where, the houses are hundreds of years old and those people have lived in that neighborhood for hundreds of years and, they've been there for generations, man, they're going to give you a real hard time if you're an outsider. Doesn't matter where you're coming from. I had one neighbor who would talk to me even though I was Hispanic, but refused to talk to my wife because she was a Northerner. And he said that the Northerners burned down his great-grandparents' house in the Civil War. So that's irrelevant to everybody else in America, but you're going to find people in Alabama who are still going to remember that their great-grandparents' house was burned down by people from Vermont or something. So just keep that always, if you're coming from a northern state, that's just simply the mentality of people here. They really hate Northerners, and a lot of Northerners that live in Alabama are eventually going to say they're from Kentucky or Tennessee. They're not even going to say they're from a northern state because they know the context it comes with. So that may be just a card you want to play. If you got some family members in Kentucky, be like, oh, I'm from Kentucky, because when they see that you're from a northern state, they're going to have a real difficult time. They're going to blame you for things that happened 300 years ago in Alabama, which, of course, you didn't participate in that. But that's really the pettiness of dealing with Alabama. I mean, Alabama continues to be a dangerous state, continues to be an uneducated state, and has a lot of really bad health metrics. So you're not dealing with bright individuals. And I really hate to have to stereotype people like that because they are mentally vivid. They are very, back to the education and health metrics and all that. Yes, they are kind of slow, but they think faster than you. And I know that is difficult to grasp. When it comes to general analytics, health metrics, safety, and all that, they really fail because they're kind of stubborn and dumb in those categories. But when you're dealing with people in Alabama, when it comes to business, when it comes to body language, when it comes to deception and stuff like that, they are much more versed than you. And you're going to find that 97% of the time, they're going to have the upper hand. So I don't know if it's crafty or deceitful or street smarts. I don't really know the proper terminology to describe this behavior of people in Alabama. They are dumb analytically and under every metric possible. It's dangerous, stupid, makes no sense. But on the other hand, do not think that they're not, we say in Spanish, vivo, or somebody who is just mentally active, somebody who's on point, you could say. They're very on point, they're very calculated, and their thinking process of dealing with people and social interactions are usually 3 to 4 steps ahead of yours. So people in Alabama, they don't just tell you something up front. You have to become really good at subtle clues, indirect communication, passive-aggressive behaviors, and you have to really read between the lines, because people in Alabama are not going to be directly aggressive towards you. There's going to be a lot of passive-aggressive behaviors, indirect conversations, and I'm a type of person that when I interact with somebody, I'll never want them to intellectually beat me, okay? I don't like to have an intellectual loss. And in Alabama, when you deal with people, you're almost always going to take an intellectual loss unless you are really, really good at making a fake front, making the other person believe it. They are really good, and you're almost always going to take an intellectual loss with people in Alabama, and that is something that, you know, you deal with somebody, you have a conversation, and, you know, when you walk away from a conversation, you either feel like you won or you lost. And I'm not saying you're going out there and arguing with people, but, you know, you're always measuring people up, and intellectually, you're almost always going to take the loss of people in Alabama, because you're going to go home, you're going to be laying on your bed, and you're like, oh man, this person said this or they said that, and it's already, you weren't fast enough. It's almost like you got punked by them intellectually, conversationally, and while they are dumb in a lot of ways, they're also very intellectual in other ways. And when it comes to dealing with people, they've been refining these types of behaviors for hundreds of years. They just know how to win intellectually. So you're going to have to be really cautious. If you take a new job, let's say you're finally there, you moved in, you took your new job. Now you're going to have to contend with these people on a daily basis. You're going to have to do business with people. You're going to have to buy. You're going to have to sell. You're going to have to make contracts. And just about every person that you're dealing with is going to have a level of intellectual finesse that is going to be 3 to 4 steps ahead of yours. There's an old saying that a silent fool can pass off as a smart man, and that's really the case of people in Alabama. It's not so much that in practice they're smarter, but it's more like in works they're smarter. They simply know how to move, they know how to win, and they don't deviate from that course. It's a time-tested finesse of dealing with people in Alabama, and that doesn't mean people aren't going to treat you fairly when they have to. One of the things that I found the most shocking about Alabama is how well people paid me to work for them. I couldn't wrap my head around the notion of how well people in Alabama paid you. But at the same time, when you go to obtain services, you're not going to be able to bargain with people. And again, you have to be fair with people or nobody's going to move for you. But at the same time, underneath that shadow are people who are trying to take advantage of you. And a lot of people in Alabama, what I noticed is they were fair, and then all of a sudden they switch on you, and now they're not fair anymore. So it's a very complicated process to do business with the people in Alabama. I learned a lot about business dealing with these individuals, where the transactions didn't really go the way I was used to. They just do business in a completely different way. And I guess there is a lot to learn about the way people do everyday dealings, particularly in business in Alabama. If there's one thing I can say I really miss about living in Alabama, was how fairly people treated you when you worked for them. I think I only got burned twice in Alabama, and they were both people from Florida. So it says it all. It's people who moved to Alabama, and then they want to keep doing things the way they used to in Miami or New York. And but I caught on to it, and I stopped dealing with certain people up there because of the way they were moving. But again, it wasn't the people from Alabama that were moving that way. So you just have to be careful now too, because other people from other states are going to seek you out for business because they think they can move the way it's really super complicated. I mean, there's a way of doing business, and you're going to have to learn it. Now, if you, for some reason or another, are the one moving on the north side of that line to a normal neighborhood in Birmingham, Alabama, I hope you know what you're getting into. You may be from a place where you can show off wealth, or like I live in Florida. There's a Lamborghini and a Ferrari. I'm sure if I started walking outside the parking lot of where I live, people here flex money they don't have. People buy a Maserati and it gets repossessed. It's just part of life here to flex. If you are moving to Birmingham and you're not really of a lot of economical means, you're going to have to be very careful of how you move. People in Alabama downplay how much money they have for their safety. When I first moved in, I noticed it, and I thought it had to do with just personalities of people or their southern ways, but it's not. It's dangerous to show off money. Let's say you buy a house in a neighborhood like this, and there's housing projects across the street. They're going to watch you. They're going to watch the clothes you wear. They're going to watch how much clothes you have in general. They're going to see what type of car you drive. Take a look at the cars in this parking lot. Some of these cars purposely might even not look that good, and it's not like they're trying to fix it. They purposely drive a car that looks bad because it keeps that profile. So you're going to have to be really careful that you don't presume of money you don't have, because people here are real petty. People in Alabama are more petty than you can wrap your head around. So if you're moving to a more inner city or a middle class neighborhood, you're going to have to be real careful with the way you move. Like, I live in Florida, and you'll see people in Florida drive certain cars, wear certain clothes. You know, they might come home with a pizza box or something. You know, that's something that if you're going to do it, you might want to do it away from the neighborhood you live in, so people in your neighborhood don't catch on to the idea that you have money fluently moving. You know, if you're going to do your grocery shopping, you may not want to do it at that little corner grocery store closest to you, you know. Or if you're coming home with some food, you might want to have a little bag, and you put the stuff inside the bag so that they can't see where you're buying your stuff from. Like here in Florida, even poor people get their groceries at Publix. You know, buying groceries at Publix, they consider that an extravagance. That's a red flag. Okay, so me and my wife, we would shop at Publix. So what we would do is that we would do our grocery shopping late at night, and when we brought in the groceries, we wouldn't have the lights turned on so our neighbors couldn't see what we were bringing into the house. Because, you know, here in Florida, you might go and make a huge grocery run and grab a bunch of stuff and bring it to the house, where your neighbors are going to look at exactly how much you brought into the house. Are you doing this on a weekly basis? What day of the month you get paid? Okay, so if it's the end of the month, it's the 28th of the month, and you're making a huge grocery haul, they don't get paid to the 3rd. They don't get paid to the 4th. I could tempt people to might want to steal from you, or might just become bitter and enraged at you because now you have something that they don't. So the pettiness of people like of lower and middle class in Alabama is superb, and you're just gonna have to learn methods of coping with how petty other people are. You know, we might do things in Florida like, you know, buy new cars, clothes. Again, even what store you get your groceries from could be a problem for people. I had friends over there, and I'm not going to get into the details of it, but I mentioned that I shop at Publix as a normal thing, and they were like, they pulled me aside and they're like, hey bro, you know, you can't just be out here flexing that you can shop at Publix. I'm like, what do you mean? those are the types of little details that here in Florida, even poor people get their groceries at Publix, but to them, that's an extravagance. And an extravagance, that's a minor detail that can leave you vulnerable. So don't think because you've lived in a hood in Miami or in some other American city that living in a hood in Alabama is the same way as living in these other hoods, bro. Living in these normal neighborhoods in Alabama is like living in prison. You really have to pay close attention to how you move, because even something as simple as you went and got groceries might be something you don't pay attention to that, right? You may not pay attention to, okay, I went and I got some groceries, big deal, right? Nah, man, if you went and get groceries on the 27th or the 28th of the month, they still haven't got their groceries. And on top of that, you're getting your groceries from a Publix. That's expensive. So those are the types of little details that may not make a difference to you. But again, people in Alabama are extraordinarily petty, and you're gonna have to learn little details. Like if you're buying your lunch at work, you know, even that could be a problem for somebody. There's starting to be more money in Alabama, and it's gonna have to do a lot with the particular setting that you are in. Look, take this particular clip that I recorded when I lived in Alabama. You can notice that I have a leather shirt. That might be a problem for somebody. You can see that I'm wearing a Panama City Beach shirt. Yo, not everybody can afford to go to Panama City Beach. Also lets people know you travel a lot. You can also see I'm wearing like a little head beanie. That head beanie, it's not a Walmart brand. It's from a store. So those types of little details are little clues that they're going to pick up on, and they're going to exploit that. They're really predatory people. They're like sharks. When they smell blood, they all start to circle around you. So on one hand, when it comes time to pay people, they want a lot of money for things. And if you don't pay them, or if you don't work around their schedule, they'll hang up the phone on you, or they'll tell you they're busy when they're not. They're going to make themselves seem more important than they are. There's that aspect of doing business. But then there's also the aspect of how do you maneuver yourself around people that are petty, poor, miserable. A lot of them are thieves. A lot of them might not be involved in crime themselves, but they'll put you as a victim to somebody else. You know, maybe your neighbors don't look like bad people, but maybe their daughter's boyfriend comes over, and he is the type of individual that if he can get access to your schedule to know when you're not home, could become a problem. And these are really small, petty things, bro, but they're the types of little details that you're going to have to look out for if you are moving to the core of the city of Birmingham, because people here are absolutely predatory. Maybe it's just a sweet old lady across the street, but maybe she has a son that comes over for the weekends. He might ask her, yo, people across the street, they there, boom. Now you've been not paying attention to that. You get set up and you get robbed, and you're scratching your head wondering, how did these people know I had this stuff here? And it's going to take a lot. So if you are moving to the dangerous, poor inner city side of Birmingham, you know, you may not have those street smarts that it takes to maneuver with people that are that petty. Maybe you have a Starbucks habit like we do here in Florida. It's not a big deal. It's normal. Getting Starbucks, and maybe at your office, everybody else, maybe they bring their coffee from home, but you walk across the street and get a Starbucks or something. That's a type of little detail that could have people scratching their heads looking at you. And it's not that their positions pay more money or less than yours. It's that simply Alabama not long ago wasn't a rich place. And there's starting to be a middle class. There's starting to be more money. But you go back 20, 30 years, and Alabama was like something straight out of the Civil War type crap. I mean, it's a place that until yesterday had a lot of problems. Didn't do very well. Had a lot of poverty. I mean, Alabama has made strides compared to where it was many years ago. It still has a lot of problems, but these are people that have generationally been in poverty, so you may come from an area that's a little bit more part of the capitalistic system, and you know, you might start looking reckless and crash out in front of people without even noticing it. And again, Alabama not that long ago was a very impoverished place. So the people there still have that poverty mentality, and sometimes you could really be sending out the wrong clues to people without even noticing it. A lot of the new homes that you're looking at and all that is all new money. These are new things. It's not stuff that was here before. So Alabama's still getting adjusted to that, and you are going to have to be really careful. Don't think that you are going to just go in there and not be green as crap. I mean, people are literally hunting for robberies. There's literally people that drive around the city just looking for an easy robbery. You know, you get outside of a gas station and you have to look and see does it look like somebody's lurking out here. And if you get back in your car, you want to do it quickly. I mean, most people are armed all the time, and they're armed because people are predatory. So you might just have to be extra alert as well. And you might think that all that is extra, but it's really not. You will get caught slipping. So as you're maneuvering around, doing like normal stuff, once it gets dark in Birmingham, you should really already have gas in your car. It takes a little bit of planning too, you know. Always have gas in your car. Don't be out late at night. You just have to plan accordingly. And the craziest thing you'll notice about Alabama is that, you know, there might be people that are up the whole entire night in their cars listening to music, smoking. It's just a never-ending leisure lifestyle that a lot of people in Alabama live. They have a lot of free time on their hands, and they use that time to just study other people and figure out how they can wreck your marriage, break into your house, or just have an upper hand on you in some way or another. You really might not be prepared for that much mental pressure. I know it might seem tempting to move to Birmingham and buy an affordable house and think, you know, that all these bad things are happening in your neighborhood, but they're not going to affect you. But you don't know that it's not that you're going to go out there looking for trouble, is that you're walking into trouble. You're in the midst of trouble. Trouble is watching you. They're looking at you. They're studying you. And eventually they are going to get you. And the crazy thing about criminals in Alabama is how persistent they are. Even if you are aware that they're following you, you know how they're going to move, you know how they're coming at you, you take all the precautions that you can, they are very persistent, they're not going to give up, and eventually they're going to get you. So the notion of just, why is a house in Birmingham worth $30,000 or $40,000 and it's inhabitable, you are eventually going to wish somebody would steal the house and it wasn't yours anymore, because they're going to plague you with problems. So I know it can be tempting when you look at those real estate prices and see a house that looks inhabitable for $80,000, and that's not even the land where you live now. It really does seem tempting. It's like, wow, man, like a house here's $80,000, a house here's $40,000, you know? I can buy a house for $40,000 and never have to worry about paying the rent. Well, you're going to have to worry about staying alive. You're going to have to worry about getting robbed. You're going to have to worry about bringing home groceries or bringing home a bag of McChickens if it's the time of the month when people around you are starving. It's a miserable life that isn't worth the affordable price. And I hope you get that part of today's video, because one of the biggest lures about this area is the affordability, but you just don't really realize the price tag that affordability is going to come with is probably a price you may not be willing to pay. So if the sole reason behind why you are interested in Birmingham, Alabama is just the notion of affordability, I hope you are willing to give away your safety, and I hope you are willing to deal with the package that it comes with. A package that I would rather be homeless in Florida than in a mansion in Birmingham. And that might sound like an exaggeration, but I absolutely mean it. If you gave me a house in even Homewood or whatever, Hoover, whatever the crap suburb of Birmingham, I would literally rather be homeless in Florida. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I think one of the best strategies for moving to Alabama is going there and not buying a house right away. Rent a house in a nice neighborhood, wherever you want. It's affordable. Rent a house, see how it goes, and if you like it, then you can eventually buy a property. I don't recommend And I know this is something you don't want to hear, because probably the reason you're looking for is affordability and thinking that you have to buy a property right away, which is still a notion that I've proven was probably one of the biggest mistakes you can make in your life. But if you want to hear me out, consider the following. If you're moving to Alabama, move there, rent for a year or 6 months, see how you like it. If you do like it, then you can slowly start to make your investments and your plans in this state. I wouldn't go head on into Alabama. I wouldn't buy a house off the bat. I wouldn't start a business off the bat. I would move there and just try to find something off of their grid, not off of yours. Keep your money somewhere safe, because I have found Alabama to be a place where you can easily get involved, start making investments, start seeing money come in, start thinking everything's going to go great, and not really see the dangers, because the allure of easy money is so much. There's so much easy money. There's so much but then remember, why aren't other people investing their money here? Why aren't other people starting businesses here? Why aren't other people buying real estate here? If it's really so lucrative, do you think that you found something that other people haven't discovered? It's probably not what you want to hear. You're probably going to move to Alabama and buy a house right away and start doing businesses right away, and whatever you want to do because you have money, you're going to go ahead and do it. And let me tell you, Alabama is I actually went with Alabama. I think I took $107,000 to Alabama, and I came back with $140,000 in a year. So my net worth actually grew in Alabama, and I lost a lot. I lost a lot. I think my net worth actually might have reached close to like $200,000, but I lost so much when I had to leave. So you might get there and your money might just start to multiply, and that might just blind you to where you're not going to see the dangers. Or if you start to see the red flags and the dangers, you're gonna feel so committed to the money you're gonna start to ignore the red flags. And that's really where Alabama can be dangerous, because then you start putting those material things before your life. And a lot of times when people move to Alabama, they think they're going to have to earn less money. That's not exactly true. One of the biggest misconceptions about moving to Alabama, I think, is that you're going to move there and you're going to starve. Not true. You're going to move there and you're probably coming from a place where rents cost more, jobs pay less. It's not a great state for people that are highly educated. It really isn't. But if you're just a normal working class person, dude, there's a lot of incentive to being in Alabama because of how little people there want to work. If you're a hard worker, you're going to succeed. Don't depend on their opportunities. Don't go to the 7-Eleven and see if they're hiring when you move to Alabama. Dude, you got to go out there and you got to create your own lane. You got to create your own avenues. But don't get too caught up in that, because eventually you're going to find out that Alabama is probably the easiest place in America to live. Wages, cost of living, a lot of cash money moves in Alabama too. They don't like paying taxes. A lot of money moves in Alabama that doesn't hit the books. There's a lot of opportunity to make money. You're going to find it alluring, actually. One of the biggest misconceptions that I've seen with Alabama is the notion that it's a poor, impoverished state. It's a poor, impoverished state because of all the things we've gone over. They're uneducated. They don't want to try hard enough. If you get enough money, you become a target, so on, so on. To the point where people that have a lot of money in Alabama live a real low-key lifestyle. And here's where you can start looking like a crash test dummy in Alabama, because here in Florida, it's hard to make money. So when I was in Alabama, I was buying cars, buying rims, buying sweaters, and I was just balling out because it has never been easier for me to make money. But in the eyes of all those other people, they might have millions of dollars that they've systematically been stacking up, but they know the danger with balling out and they hold back And in fact, they become masters at hiding the fact that they have money because they know it makes them a target. Having money may not make you a target where you live now, but the illusion that there's something to take will absolutely make you a target in Alabama. So all that are good things to think about when you move to this state. Fear of economical hardship is possibly one of the biggest misconceptions about Alabama. I don't think there's economical hardship waiting for you in Alabama, but I do feel like you're going to have to learn how to move differently.